welcome to the latest Moviescramble podcast. In this episode, we are continuing our 1995 retrospective with two of the most critically acclaimed films from the year in question, The Usual Suspects and Se7en. Although they have both since become controversial by association, these films gave audiences thrills and spills for a combined box office total of $353 million. Joining me on this episode is a man who's never been seen in the same room as Kaiser Soze. It's John.
Yeah. I'd like to. I'm very good, thank you very much. I'd like to note that I've never been in the same room as Kevin Spacey either, so I'm 2 for 2.
Much to your relief, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a wee bit too old for him, so that's probably.
We're going right in with the jabs.
Well, we might as well. We're going to have to talk about it at some point anyway. But yes, I'm very well. I'm enjoying this extended period of very nice weather and still maintaining my love of all things cinema by watching as much stuff as I possibly can. So good. So how are you?
Really good, as you say, enjoying unusually warm summer and just trying to catch up on everything that I want to watch before it leaves whatever streaming platform it happens to be on this particular month. So, but I'm very much looking forward to this episode of the pod because these are two of my favourite films, although I don't know if you're allowed to admit that anymore.
Let's just get this out of the way before we actually start, because there's obviously the shadow that hangs over these films, but the way that I am looking at them is that they are just genuinely great films and involve so many more people than the sort of the controversial elements. So yes, I still like films, but we will have digs in there, no doubt, at some point.
So let's get into the films. I thought we would start with The Usual Suspects.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
All right, you all know the drill.
And that was how it started. The 5 of us being brought in on a trumped-up charge to be leaned on by half-wits.
Number 1, step forward.
It didn't make sense that I'd be there. I mean, these guys were hardcore hijackers.
Answer my question.
Can you hear me in the back? Hello?
What the cops never figured out, and what I know now, was that these men would never break, never bend over for anybody.
You gonna charge me?
You don't put guys like that into a room together.
Let's get back to the truck.
Who knows what can happen?
This film, obviously directed by Bryan Singer and written by Christopher McQuarrie. The film centres around 5 criminals who are arrested and brought together for questioning following a truck hijacking in New York. As none of them are guilty, they plan a revenge operation against the police. The operation does go well, but they soon find themselves under the influence of legendary mastermind criminal called Kaiser Soze. It becomes clear that each one of them has wronged Soze at some point and must have pay back their dues now. The payback job in question leaves loads of men dead in a boat explosion, but the real question remains, who is Kaiser Soze? Now, spoilers, because obviously this film is like several years old. So in terms of, let's just get straight into it. Talk about performances, and let's talk about the controversial performance in question. Kevin Spacey's portrayal of Bevel Kint is obviously seen as very compelling. He won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for it. How do you think it shapes the film's impact, and do you regard it differently now?
Strangely enough, I do not regard the film differently now, because the film is so strong that it overcomes the fact that Kevin Spacey has been accused of, let's put it fairly blunt, some fairly unsavoury things that he's been accused of. Now, that for me doesn't deter from the impact of his performance and the performances around him, or the way that the film has been directed, because obviously Bryan Singer is not regarded in the best light either these days. But I still regard the film in the same way that I did when I saw it back in 1995. Still kind of blown away by it. So yeah, it's no different for me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is difficult for me because obviously I was Kevin Spacey's number 1 fan. And I think I look back on this performance, it's difficult because he seems so vulnerable. Obviously, like they call him the Gimp. He's got like a messed up hand, a limp. He seems really like he stutters over his words. He is quite calm, but he's also really convincing as someone who is maybe more vulnerable or sort of less hardened than the others. Like, I feel like the suspicion is never on him throughout the film compared to the rest of the sort of cast of characters. And obviously, you look at that maybe with a slightly different lens now. But I do think it is one of the sort of defining performances of the 90s. Like, obviously he won, as I say, the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for it. I think he is flawless in his portrayal of someone who you don't know, like, who he is, essentially. Like, we're told he's called Verbal, we're told he's like a, you know, kind of small-time criminal, he's the brains behind what they do, but you never really get to know him on a surface level, despite the fact that he talks like a budgie when he's in the detective's office. You never really get to find out anything concrete about him, and I think it's a very interesting performance, it's a very nuanced performance, and it does sort of hold the whole film together, because obviously we have his voiceover sort of guiding the action, and it's told in a non-linear structure, so you do have to pay attention to what's going on. Like, are you in a flashback or are you in, you know, sort of present day? And so it's his scenes in the detective's office or his voiceover that really pulls the whole story together. So it is very conflicting to watch it now, but there is no taking away from the fact that it is a masterclass in deception, essentially.
Oh, definitely,
And of course, you've got a really, you know, a fantastic ensemble cast as well. You've got Benicio del Toro, Gabriel Byrne, Stephen Baldwin, Kevin Pollak. Totally forgot that Giancarlo Esposito is in this film as well, sporting a really cool 90s sort of goatee thing. How do you feel like that contributes to the film's dynamic? Because it is a big ensemble piece. It's not just about Verbal.
Yes. The film starts with the titles, and the titles list all of the actors in alphabetical order, emphasising the fact that this is an ensemble piece. This is not a star vehicle for any one person. Obviously, probably Gabriel Byrne was probably the biggest name that was actually involved in this at the time, because he'd come off the back of like Miller's Crossing and things like that. So he did have a Hollywood career and everything. So you could regard him as being sort of headliner, but they didn't take it in that way. They very much set the stall right away by saying this is a film that's going to involve a lot of people and is to be regarded in that way. And that's kind of how they started out. And I thought, it's quite a subtle way of doing that. And like I say, the film itself is focused around the interview and the voiceover and everything. But it's very much an ensemble piece. I don't think it would work in the same way if it was sort of slightly lesser actors in these roles than it was maybe Gabriel Byrne and Kevin Spacey with sort of lesser talented people. It needed all these people. These portrayals they're all at the top of their game when they're doing this. It's really, really good. It's really tight. I mean, this film is an hour and 45 minutes long, something like that. So
it's not a long film.
It's not a long film. So it really gets to the heart of it really quickly and gets on with it. So in order for that to work, you need a group of actors who are working really closely together. Maybe not always getting on with each other, because there was certain tensions within the film as well. Thinking Kevin Pollak and Stephen Baldwin famously fell out during this film, and they have had a sort of an ongoing feud ever since about it. And they said that was partly to do with the fact that Stephen Baldwin stayed in character as much as possible, so he was really horrible. But yes, you can class this as an ensemble drama rather than a star performance. Obviously, like say, Spacey did win an Oscar for his performance, but that shouldn't denigrate from any of the other performances that are actually there as well.
No, absolutely not. And I think that, you know, I love when you first meet Benicio del Toro's character and he's dressed like something out of Saturday Night Fever. And he's got like this sort of like breathy sort of mumble going on. And then you've got obviously that very famous police lineup, which forms like the poster and the DVD cover, everything. And they all have to do the hand me the keys, you cocksucker thing. And apparently all of that corpsing was real, because Benicio del Toro was farting very frequently and causing everyone to burst out laughing. So not only were they laughing at each other's sort of impressions of reading that line, it was the fact that he obviously had a very sore stomach that day. But I do think in terms of ensemble cast, like the key scene for me is actually when they all get locked in the first sort of holding cell together. And you get that little bit of background about who they all are, how they know each other, because they have obviously sort of crossed paths before. They've got the kind of banter, that sort of like kind of rapid dialogue exchanges, sort of insults kind of flying. But you do sort of get to know them as, you know, small time crooks or, you know, sort of big players, depending on who it is that's talking. And then that way you actually get an idea of how they're going to work together, who's going to be, you know, the hard man, who's going to be the thinker, who's going to, you know, wheedle their way into a certain room. So I think that it definitely is truly an ensemble piece in that sense. And of course, then you've got all the characters of the various police detectives who are obviously working to their own agenda as well, i.e. trying to sort of bring them in. But I definitely think that it's one of these films that, as you say, it works because everybody's at the top of their game. It's not just about, you know, one particular character. One of the things that really always strikes me about this film is the nature of truth and storytelling. So obviously they're all sort of, you know, crooks essentially. They're all sort of very flimsy, shall we say, with their interpretation of events. How do you feel that, like, Chris McQuarrie's script in particular sort of drives this notion of like myth making, fantasy, you know, where the truth actually lies in the grey areas? Because I feel like this is a really brilliant script for that sort of idea.
The whole point of this is there's no real truth at all to it. It's all basically what people want to hear. When Verbal is getting interviewed, the detective, is it Kajan, his name is? Kujan. Yeah. All he is interested in is a certain level of truth. He doesn't want to know certain things. He wants basically his ideas reinforced, what he's actually going for. He's just after Keaton. He's not really interested in any of the rest of them. So he wants to basically have it affirmed that Keaton is the ringleader, and also in the later parts of it that Keaton is Kaiser Soze as well, when the name of Kaiser Soze is eventually introduced to it. So there is no truth to be had here. It's just one story after another. They all tell stories, they all lie, and there's a wee bit of the voiceover where they're being interviewed or interrogated, and Verbal says these guys are all professionals, none of them will crack, and they all just tell a wee story. They all just, you know, feed back to the interrogators and say, basically insulting them and riling them up. So it's putting them off track, it's just giving them time, and they're just obviously thinking all the time about ways in order to deflect the questions, and they're very good at it. And like I say, they even though they're faced with the prospect of being incarcerated, they don't care about that because they're all career criminals. It's part of the job description that you may get put away for something, or you may be involved in these sort of lineups, that kind of thing. So yeah, there is no truth in this whatsoever. It's the very definition of an unreliable narrator here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I love the whole notion of myth making in general. Like, so you only get that essentially a fake flashback to Kaiser Soze with his long flowing hair that's like waist length, and he comes in and it's this notion that there's like a Turkish-Hungarian sort of gang war going on, and rather than have, you know, his wife and kids be taken hostage, he would shoot them himself. And then you get this image of like this, as I say, his flowing locks, there's fire in the background, and you're like, this is complete fairy tale. Like, it's just not true. But I do love this notion that, you know, Kaiser Soze, even though this is the first time these detectives are hearing this name, that already there's like a whole landscape built up around who he is and where he's come from. And of course, it's not just like he's a small time player he's worked his way up. It's like he's, you know, there's a sort of an exotic air to him because he's come from Europe somewhere, or the sort of Eastern Med somewhere, and you know, he's killed his own family. So I love the fact that they weave this into the story, and I think that the script in particular obviously does a really good job of creating this fairy tale around not just Soze but all of these other characters themselves, because these small time crooks obviously believe their own myth as well as to who they are and how important they are to the police. So you obviously
but like you said
like
you said with the story and how it's all unreliable and what the truth is and everything, they do sort of fall over themselves at times, because like you mentioned there with the whole Kaiser Soze myth, where he killed his own family and then he killed all of the Hungarians. He wiped them out. He wiped out their friends, their families, anybody, their shops, anybody that knew them. But yet the main part of this story is the Hungarian gangsters are actually on the boat. So how does that work if he's wiped them all out and they're still there? So there's wee things and there's a couple of wee bits in there that it kind of thought, but they're not really looking at the story in that way, the detectives, so they just want to find out what their truth is here. So it does make sense that, yes, it is fairy tales and people are not totally perfect in their telling of the story. They can't fall over. But if it's just a small lie, then they can get away with it. So yeah, I kind of liked that because that's what I picked up in that when they're saying it was the Hungarians that actually were getting this guy on the boat, and you're going, but they're all dead, they're gone. He doesn't have any rivals. So yeah, aye.
Yeah, it's, as you say, they're looking for confirmation of their truth, not the truth. So it's yeah. Now, obviously, you mentioned that you were lucky enough to go and see this back in 1995 when it came out. The final twist, obviously, is one of the most famous in cinema history. Did you see it coming the first time? And what was the reaction like in the room when people were watching this film?
I did not see the twist coming at all. I was led down the path and I just followed it the way the filmmakers were wanting me to go. So when it actually happened, I was just like, what the actual fuck? And there was like audible gasps and the people were going, but that,
oh, no way!
And when you're coming out, people were going, but how is he? And, you know, they were kind of trying to figure it out, you know, how did he play into it and all that? Because it's one of these films that it takes a couple of watches to get everything that's going on, which is a sign of a good movie, obviously. But yes, it was very interesting the way that it happened that way. And it was a big deal because you didn't expect that, given everything that had kind of happened before, because it was put on screen sort of like a modern noir type film, and they follow a sort of a linear path from beginning to end, even though, like I say, there's flashbacks and it does mix up the continuity a bit, but you expected a certain ending there. You expected, well, I'm not going to spoil what the what the end is, but you kind of expected a character to come back and he would be explained as being Kaiser Soze, which didn't actually happen. But there's enough ambiguity in there that you just don't know what's real and what's not real. But yeah, I can't say I was very clever about the whole thing at all. I was completely taken in by it, which is obviously a very good thing because I like that. I like being bamboozled by a twist in a film and not knowing what it doesn't make me feel stupid or anything. It just makes me think I want to see this film again. So I always take that sort of attitude towards it.
Yeah, and I feel like now, even if you're watching it and you do know the twist, it doesn't spoil your enjoyment. If anything, you're still looking for clues as you're going along. Do you feel the same when you're rewatching?
Yes, yeah, especially because obviously the main part of the film is Verbal getting interviewed in the office. So because you know certain things from the end of it, then you are looking for certain tells and stuff, and there's not really. That's the thing, that there's not a lot of obvious tells that feed into what the final twist actually is. It's done very subtly. It doesn't sort of smack you in the face with it, with like the coffee cup, for instance. You don't get anything from that during the film. It's only when it smashes at the end that you actually get it. So the audience isn't being fed these. It's very, very subtle in the way that it's done.
No, definitely not. And I was trying to think, like, is there a scene in particular that gives anything away? And I can't, like, I think the closest that you maybe come to is, you know, they say to Verbal, like, you're going to be the most wanted man. And he's like, oh, I think once Kaiser Soze finds me, like, we'll not hear anything more of me or hear anything more of him, which would suggest they obviously are one and the same. But there's not really anything that was, because you're not paying attention to all of the clues around you. Obviously, neither is the detective. You're paying attention to the story and you're obviously getting hooked into that. But is there a scene in particular that you like? Is there a standout scene that you really enjoy? Is there like one that just makes you go, this is a top class film?
It was the scene that introduced Kobayashi when they're in the room with the pool table. That's the one that really gets me, because it totally turns everything on its head at that point, because up until that point they were involved like in like drugs and things like that. They had certain, certain cachet. They'd done the job and everything. So yeah, that was really good. But it was that particular scene there where everything was kind of laid out, basically saying, "You guys are not in charge here. This is," and as part of that scene, it's where he says, "I work for Kaiser Soze," and the temperature in the room just drops dramatically, apart from verbal, because he doesn't know who Kaiser Soze is, which I kind of found a wee bit unbelievable, because if this boogeyman criminal is the myth that he is, then everybody knows about him. So that felt a wee bit strange, but he was low level enough, or he was portrayed as being low level enough that you didn't really question it too much. But yeah, I really loved that scene. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that is my favourite scene of the whole film as well. I will say that I'm still not quite sure to this day what accent Pete Postlethwaite is trying to do. He is sporting a rather dark tan, which makes me suspicious that he's supposed to sound vaguely Indian or something.
I think that's what he was going for, yeah.
It's not the best. However, as you say, the temperature, completely drops in the room. And then you've got this moment where every single one of them is handed a file on themselves. And up until this point, they've all been kind of cocky, arrogant. They can get away with whatever they want. The police are never going to catch them. And all of a sudden, they realise they don't have the upper hand, and that Kaiser Soze knows everything about them. And of course, you have that scene with Gabriel Byrne's character where he opens the file and he realises there's pictures of his partner in there as well. So there now becomes a greater risk than just himself. And then, of course, you've got Verbal in the corner. He asks about 3 times and nobody answered him. He's like, who's Kaiser Soze? And it's so weak the way he says it. And of course, he's scanning the room sort of wide-eyed, looking at, basically all of them, their arses have collapsed because they're looking at these files going, oh, fuck, like we need to do this job. And so he is trying to sort of read the room at the same time as Kobayashi just remains perfectly composed and just tells them, like, it's quite simple. You're going to do this. Like, it's not up for debate. Like, this job will be carried out. There's going to be lives lost and you're going to do it. So, yeah, that's one of my favourite scenes in the whole film. Just because it's the first time we see them on the back foot. Yeah. Yeah,
and it also explains the original job that they'd all been pulled in for as well, because one of them actually did the job. They were so good that nobody cracked, because it turns out that the Kevin Pollak character did it, and they all turn around and look at him, and he goes, yeah. And he's like, well, I didn't know. Yeah. He's really like, it's such a good scene. And it also raises the stakes as well, because up until this point, yes, the heists and stuff that they've been doing have been quite audacious, but up until that point, there's maybe not been a sort of personal risk, whereas now it feels like, there's the film has taken a turn. And of course, on top of that, we've got John Ottman's, fantastic score, going across this whole film. What did you think in terms of enhancing the sort of tension, the atmosphere? I feel like it was kind of Zimmer-esque at times, and that there was a wee sort of ticking motif going through it as well. Like, I really enjoyed it. What did you think? I have a copy of the soundtrack that I bought after going to see the film. I just loved it. I've got it on CD somewhere in this hovel of a room that I'm in. And I listened to it incessantly for ages. The theme, the Usual Suspects theme, is one of my favourite pieces of music. I just think it's so evocative of what you're going to get. It sort of looks back towards older sort of film noir. It's that kind of idea, it's fully orchestrated and everything, and the soundtrack weaves in, like, say, tension into scenes and things like that. It uses, like, sort of propulsive nature of some of the pieces and everything as well. So yeah, it works really well, and you can listen to it on your own. If you're listening to it, you get the images of what's actually been happening on screen if you've seen it often enough, which I have, unfortunately. So yes, I loved that. I didn't realise that he was the editor on the film as well.
Yeah, when I saw the credits go up, I thought that's really unusual, having a composer who's also the editor. But I guess in a way it makes sense, because you're editing the film around the music, or putting the music in around the editing. So exactly, I guess those two departments should sort of work hand in glove. But yeah, I mean, I think the score really complements the the sort of style of directing as well, because you've obviously got quite a lot of like intense close-ups, interrogation scenes. There's that sense. It's a real pressure cooker, and in particular when they try and go after what they call New York's finest taxi service, which is the obviously corrupt ring of cops. Like the sort of ticking sound and the kind of violins and full strings that you get going along with that, as you say, it's very sort of noir-esque, but at the same time it is making your heart sort of beat that little bit faster, because you're like, oh, what's going on here? This is like really exciting. And speaking of New York's finest taxi service, I think what's really interesting about The Usual Suspects as well is that it's kind of fast and loose with how it portrays criminality, because of course there's two sides to that. There is the corrupt cops who are obviously taking cash and funds for transporting unsavouries about, and then you've got the sort of 5 lead criminals themselves, but they're not necessarily, for all that they're doing bad things, they are seen as quite maybe glamorous, I guess, like quite cocky, quite funny. What do you think of that in terms of it's not exactly portraying all elements of criminality as like low life, grim, seedy? Like there is a sort of swagger to it, I guess.
Yeah, there are very sympathetic portrayals of the 5 main characters. Yes, they're said to be hardened criminals in a lot of way. They're not new to this at all, but yes, they are dealt with in a very sympathetic way, especially Keaton. Keaton is seen as this being sort of, when you're introduced to him, he's wearing this lovely tan suit and he's very well presented. He's sitting having dinner, speaking to French financiers about opening up a restaurant and stuff. So you're getting this impression that he is more of a businessman and he was maybe done wrong as a policeman. But then when you hear a bit more about him, he was in prison and he killed 3 people. And he explains that to...
not quite as suave,
Redfoot, when he speaks to him and he says, that he was talking about the guy that he was in prison at, and he says, oh yeah, he got shanked. That was me. I just wanted to tell you that up front. And he's very matter of fact about it because it came very easily to him. It wasn't something that he had to do because it was like a problem. It was, you get the idea that it was to make sure that nobody was going to mess with him, being an ex-police officer in, like, I think it was Sing Sing, they said he was in. So it was obviously like a sort of high security prison, as we've seen in the film Sing Sing. So it's not exactly the nicest of places. So having a police officer in there being subject to inmates want to kill him, basically. So yes, he basically set his stall out and made sure that nobody messed with him. And he was hard as nails, but he doesn't come across. He's very sympathetically introduced because he has the beautiful girlfriend and he's trying to do the right thing and rebuild his life. But yeah, he's just as nuts as all the rest of them, but he's not quite as rough. He's smoothed off those edges. But yes, there is sort of different tiers of criminality. You get the Los Angeles ones, they look more like sort of hardened criminals. You've got the police, like you say, who are criminal in the same way, but they can cover it up a lot better. But yes, it's very subtly done. You're made to feel something for these people, so when things actually start to go south, you actually sympathise with them and you want them to actually come out on top here. But if there is a top to come out of, that's the thing.
Yeah, because in a way, I feel like you're not necessarily on the side of justice or the law, whatever you want to call it. You don't necessarily want Agent Kujan in particular to succeed. You kind of want these guys to get away with it, which I think obviously is quite a conflicting feeling, as you say, knowing exactly who they are as people and what they're willing to do. Because although I wouldn't say it's an overly violent film, but there are obviously references to violence, as you've said, he gets shanked, that was me. And there are sort of some bigger set pieces where they are sort of more threatening, but I wouldn't say it was particularly over the top with the violence, would you?
No, a lot of the violence is actually off screen. When there's the scene in the lift with Kobayashi and the 2 bouncers, screen goes black and they get shot and you just see the aftermath of a bit of blood. With the 2 guys who are in the garage, when they get shot, you don't actually see them. I think maybe you do see them. There's no killing involved with the raid of New York's finest. That's done without any bloodshed at all. And you don't see some other killing. You see, obviously, there's a wee bit of killing, obviously, in the scene with the boat when that all kicks off. But even then, that's
still
kind of
quite
done.
a lot of it off screen. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, a lot of it. You hear gunfire in the background and things like that when they're going through the ship and everything. So, yeah, it's not done in that way, and that's more about focusing on the characters rather than focusing on the violence. You won't remember this film for the violence. You will remember this film for the story, the twist, the characters, which is the way that it should be. Is focusing on the writing and the story in that respect, which means that it'll have more of a life, because if you're just focusing on the violence, then it kind of dates it really quickly, because the approach to violence on screen changes in an awful lot of ways. You've seen it going from just sort of total like hard-boiled gun violence, and then you go into like gung fu, if you like, as well. There's only one wee element of that's where Kaiser Soze turns a gun to the side and shoots him. That's a very sort of 90s thing that came in quite a lot with like Tarantino films.
That was a massive trend, and I've no idea why.
Just because it looked cool. The whole point of having a gun is you've got a sight on the top of it for you to aim, so you can't do that if it's on its side. It's for sort of close action, just looks.
Looks a bit killer. So you mentioned obviously that the violence could date it. How do you think the film has sort of influenced modern crime thrillers or sort of this mystery storytelling? There is I would definitely say there's a legacy there.
There's always been films that have twists and everything, so it wasn't anything ingenious that it did, but it did it so well. It did it through storytelling, did it through an unreliable narrator. It did it in such a way that it didn't give you very many clues. So it's a real masterclass in doing that. And a lot of films after that followed the same sort of pattern. But they wouldn't do it as well. They didn't trust their audience to actually go along with them. So they would have more markers. They would have wee bits that you would kind of go, right, I can see what the twist is good here, and it kind of waters it down, but it doesn't affect the impact of the film itself. I think it had a real impact on films that came, like, obviously it would be like 2 years after that, from sort of 1997 onwards. So you would see that. You even see that a wee bit with the likes of The Matrix, because there's a bit of a twist in there, because they're actually living in the Matrix. So there's, you can see that they've taken elements from that, and it gave the sort of crime drama genre a bit of a boost as well, because it showed that you can do these kind of films where for the majority of it you've got two people in the room talking. Fair enough, there's lots of flashbacks and stuff, but that's your basis for that film. So it can be done, but it has to be done well. It can't just copy what you've got before. But I think it did give that whole sort of area a boost. The mid-level picture, again.
It's exactly what we've said. And I definitely think that, I mean, if you think about modern films with twists, obviously the obvious example would be any of the sort of M. Night Shyamalan films, like starting with, I forgot what it's called.
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense, that's it.
Sixth Sense.
That obviously was, again, a really big twist. And this film was marketed obviously quite well. You've got the Who is Kaiser Soze, that was everywhere at the time, but it was never ever guiding you down and we're going to give you the answers as well. It was always about the question as opposed to, spoon feeding it. And apparently all of the actors, when they were given their scripts, were told they were Kaiser Soze, and so they all played the film like that. And apparently when Gabriel Byrne found out he wasn't, he stormed off the set and had to be like cajoled back into continuing shooting, which is quite hilarious and a nice wee sort of like little bit of movie trivia, I guess. But yeah, I definitely think that if you look at how other directors have approached, I mean, I even think of something like Memento, which is obviously not told in a linear fashion and has quite a big twist in it as well. You can see that there are elements of The Usual Suspects beyond genre, I would think, actually, and influencing it in terms of, don't spoon feed your audience. If you're going to get, give a twist, don't do this, don't do that, and here's how you sort of, leave everyone's jaw on the floor at the end of it. I think you can definitely see that across, as I say, different genres as well. And what I did wonder,
the film starts at the end.
Yes, exactly.
it goes back and forward. Obviously, Memento starts at the end and then works its way chronologically back to the start. But yes, it's a very good point. It's storytelling 101. Engage your audience in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I definitely think that this is one of Chris McQuarrie's like first big scripts, I think. And it is fucking brilliant. Like, I know obviously he's now sort of like perma associated with Tom Cruise and the Mission Impossible films, but when you actually look back at this as a piece of writing, it is phenomenal. Like, genuinely, if that's one of your first sort of forays into Hollywood, you know, it's pretty damn good going. But one of the things I did wonder yesterday when I was watching it is, do you think the film would have the same impact if it was released today? I guess because of things like TikTok and spoilers and having to stay off the internet if a film's got a big twist. Do you think it would still be as, oh my God, I cannot believe that was the twist?
I think it would initially, yes, because a lot of people, for all the sort of prevalence of TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that, a lot of people aren't on these platforms still. So if they want to avoid, and they'll be told, the way the marketing for the film would work would be that don't spoil this film for people, go into it fresh. So a lot of people would go into it fresh and just want to experience it for themselves rather than getting it spoiled. So you would avoid, like for myself, I would avoid anything online about it. I would stay away from everything to do with like the plot and all that. Obviously, you would see the trailers and stuff, but yeah, I would still have the sort of a high level of impact, but more people would know there's a twist. Then that's the only thing you would know that there's something that, because in an interview somewhere or a review would say, oh, you know, what a way that it actually went, and then people would be expecting that more than anything else. So perhaps not the same sort of level as impact as it did have, but I think it would still have a pretty good impact, to be fair. Would you think differently?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just really querying this because it took me back to when Nosferatu came out at the start of this year, and the big thing was the reveal of the character Luke. So I basically muted a whole bunch of words on Twitter, stayed off TikTok, etc. And I was only going to see it, bear in mind, one day after it came out, and yet I still felt like I had to take these sort of precautions or whatever. And so I don't know. I think you're right. I think it would have made a lot of people more aware that they were going into a film where there was a big twist at the end. But I don't necessarily, I think you would have to, if you were going to see it and you were committed to it, I think you would have to do the sensible thing of sort of muting all or staying off the internet entirely until you'd seen it. And I just think it's a film that I love to go back and watch, even though I know what the ending is. But I just think now you probably wouldn't get that big as big a surprise, I guess, which is a shame because I feel like we've lost that sort of element of cinema in the sense that you can't really go in and be surprised about anything because somebody will have spoiled it somewhere.
No, you're right. It's not quite the same anymore, which is a bit of a pity. But you can still get it for smaller films that are not basically coming in under the radar and become a hit because of the reaction of audiences. And they've not had the same sort of publicity or the expectations upon them. It's not been like big stars involved in it. So something is maybe coming from another country, that kind of idea, you know, and it's been brought in and you suddenly go, you know, why did I not know about this beforehand? So it does still happen. It's rarer than it used to be, but it can still happen, which is obviously a very good thing, let's face it.
Yeah, it was just an interesting thing. As I say, it's obviously one of the most famous twists, the most famous smashed coffee cup, perhaps, in cinema. And I just wondered, would it have that impact now? Because obviously we've talked about, like, for example, in the last episode, we talked about how well the Superman cast are using TikTok to promote. But I just think that these platforms can be a blessing and a curse when it comes to a film like this.
Yeah, there's the official marketing for things, and like I say, there's just people who are just posting all sorts of stuff because they've seen it on day one and want to spoil it for everybody else. That's what it comes down to. It's just for likes and traffic, isn't it? They do these things, and it's completely unnecessary. They're just spoiling the experience for everybody else, an experience that they have had, and it's obviously affected them in such a way that they want to share that. And you're saying, well, take a beat. You know, wait a week and do it before. But no, it's it's just instantaneous. You know, they have to
Yeah.
get whatever opinion, valid or not, out there and
Yeah.
basically ruin things for other people. And like I say, people have to go to extremes like muting whole services and barring certain words and all that sort of stuff. Yes, it is a bit crazy. I would never do anything like that. I want people to enjoy a film. That's why I haven't really
Yeah.
talked spoilers here for a film that's 30 years old.
Exactly.
I would prefer somebody to go and watch this film and get the same kick from it that I got when I watched it, which you probably wouldn't, because because you wouldn't. Now if somebody watched it, they would be saying, oh, there's a big twist anyway, so everybody knows. But that's fair enough. The film's 30 years old. It's not it wasn't out 2 weeks ago or anything like that. But yes, you want people to have the same it's almost like a jealousy thing. You want to be able to enjoy that moment again for the first time.
Yeah,
and you can only enjoy that sort of vicariously through other people. Now it can only be through somebody else watching it. It's like when I watched The Empire Strikes Back with my son when he was like maybe only about 5 or 6, and when he got the Darth Vader twist, the Darth Vader and Luke twist, and the look in his face when he saw that, because the whole narrative up to that was, you know, these are opposing forces. So, and then how that kind of was. And you see that time and time again with people getting introduced, and it was the look on his face when he saw it, and he was kind of like, what?
Yeah.
And you're kind of like reliving that. It's like watching something with somebody who doesn't know how things are going to go. You say, I'll stick this on, it'll be quite good. And you're going,
yes, I love introducing people to films where you know something and then you're just waiting for them to be like shocked or, you know, things coming. I love that feeling.
And it was the same with Game of Thrones, the first season of Game of Thrones. I watched it, and then I watched it again when Leslie wanted to sort of start watching it and catch up. So he says, oh, we'll watch the first season again. I'm quite happy to. And there's a big thing in that. I think it's like the 9th episode, which I won't spoil obviously here. And she was going, what the actual fuck, what happened there? What's going on? This doesn't make any sense. So yes, it's good to have that experience, which is fleeting, let's say. It doesn't happen every day now. Yes.
So that obviously is The Usual Suspects. And I feel like we have been very generous with our lack of spoilers for
yes.
Quite a famous film.
I like the idea with it that it came from Christopher McQuarrie hearing the phrase the usual suspects when he was standing in the cinema queue with one of his friends, and we were talking about this article, and it was something to do with The Usual Suspects. Obviously it comes from Casablanca, the actual quote, round up the usual suspects, but he saw this article, liked the title of it, The Usual Suspects, and then came up with a poster idea of him standing in the lineup. And it was from that, when he took that to Bryan Singer, he says, yeah, it's a good idea. Go and write a story about it now. So it came from the name first, which is really strange.
So unusual, yeah.
Yeah. Usually comes from a story idea, and then they fit everything. Obviously, marketing goes around it, but it was like kind of arse about elbow this way. It was really, quite strange. And did you like Christopher McQuarrie in the film?
He's in it. Have I missed a wee appearance?
Yes, yeah. He is the interrogator in the police scene.
Oh my God, where they're getting the lamps in their faces.
Yes. Yep. During, I think Keaton is the last one to be interviewed in that sequence. And you know how you get they're talking directly to them, and then they switch.
Yes.
They actually walk in front of the camera, and it becomes a close-up after that, which I thought was really kind of a nice wee move. The very last one, there's a commentary on the film, which goes into a lot of detail about. So it's Bryan Singer and Christopher McQuarrie, and Christopher McQuarrie says he knew he was going to be on it. See, it was a limited production. They didn't have a lot of money, so they used whatever resources they had. So he did the interview scene, and he made sure that his ring was prominent on screen, so his mum would know that it was him, because you only see his face right at the very end. And when they were doing all these, when they were doing these interview scenes, there was a lot of unscripted work in it. So when they were firing back at him, they were firing back insults at him. So they were like talking about his weight and things like that and how he looked and all this sort of stuff because they knew that it would get a reaction and it seemed very genuine. And Benicio del Toro at one point says, at some point during this, he said to Christopher McQuarrie, at some point during this scene, I'm going to get up and attack you, or I might not.
Oh my God.
So it was like really on edge. But you can see him right at the end of the Keaton interview. He sits on the desk and you can just see the side of his face. And you can, in the commentaries, he says, "Oh, that's my ear. You can see my ear then." You see, which is really, it's really kind of, it's a nice wee sort of touch. Because like I say, they had to get people in to do these wee scenes. Kaiser Soze is apparently played by 5 different people.
Yes, I read that. Yeah. So that you were never quite certain about like height and build. They sort of brought in different people.
There was that, and there was the fact that they were just filling in parts because there was one part where he's lighting a cigarette. That's somebody when he lights the cigarette and then he starts running away, and you just see his foot and his leg. That's Bryan Singer's leg. And when it's Kaiser Soze killing his kids and his wife, that's one of the grips on the film. That's not an actor. That's not Spacey. Or it's not.
Locks.
Yeah, so they used him apparently because his arms couldn't lock properly, so it looked more dramatic when he was actually shooting as well. It was just, and it was just as necessary as they needed to do it. It was really kind of. I would recommend listening to the.
I've got. On the Blu-ray that I have, it does have a second disc and it's got all these special features, but obviously because I was trying to get prepped and I just watched the film itself. But I will
the commentary is actually on the disc. When I bought the film, when it came out first on VHS, this was 1996, and it came out in a limited edition VHS set that had 2 VHS tapes on it. One of them had the film. The second VHS had the film with the commentary on it. This was before the days of obviously DVDs where you could have multiple tracks. It was 2 separate actual VHS tapes, which was pretty much unheard of, and it's this limited edition thing. I've got it kicking about somewhere, and it was like about 20 quid or something for it at the time. It was really expensive, but I wanted this copy of it, especially with the commentary, so you could listen to them actually explaining stuff, and at the same time not really explaining because they wanted to keep some sort of mystery about it. Although at the very start of the commentary they give away the ending as well. And they say, if you've come here and this is the first time you're actually watching this film with this commentary, we failed to do our job properly. So it's quite nice.
That is brilliant. Yeah, no, I think it's one of these films that absolutely holds up. Not even just in terms of like age, but just watch after watch, you're still getting, I think, value for everything that you're tracking down, like every look, every sentence, every scene. I just think it's a brilliant film to go back and revisit. And I only saw it when I was maybe about 11 or 12, so I didn't obviously see it in the cinema. And I remember the first time that I watched it, just being like, oh, how have they done this? Like, I just thought this was the cleverest thing that had ever happened in cinema, basically. And then you obviously work your way back and revisiting it as a bit older as well. You're like, oh, this is cool more than anything else. Like, it's just got it's just an excellent piece of cinema. And speaking of excellent pieces of cinema, we can now go on and talk about Se7en.
There are 7 deadly sins: gluttony, greed, pride, sloth, wrath, lust, and envy.
Honestly, have you ever seen anything like this? No.
This guy's methodical, exacting, and worst of all, patient.
Like what you do for a living? These things you see.
Oh God, he had a gun in my mouth.
He's 2 murders away from completing his masterpiece. Let's finish it.
Who's in the bar?
You know, this isn't going to have a happy end.
Which, depending on how you spell it, either has a number in the middle of it, which makes no fucking sense, or is just spelled the normal way. I actually sat down to watch my DVD copy of this and realised that I've obviously bought it from like the Barras or something, because it was like an inch worth of screen and the rest of it was all black. So it is on Prime for a few more weeks if anyone's looking to watch it. So this film is written by Andrew Kevin Walker and directed by David Fincher. It follows the story of two homicide detectives tracking down a sadistic serial killer who chooses his victims according to the 7 deadly sins. Brad Pitt stars as Detective David Mills, a hopeful but naive rookie who finds himself partnered with veteran Detective William Somerset, played by Morgan Freeman. Together, they trace the killer's every step, witnessing the aftermath of his horrific crimes as the victims pile up in rapid succession, all the while moving closer to a gruesome fate neither of them could have predicted. So we talked about performance first with The Usual Suspects. What do you feel like the performances are? These are two very big stars, obviously leading this film, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. How do you feel their performances work? They're obviously quite contrasting in terms of their professional and personal approach to their job. How do you feel they drive the film?
Well, the character of Somerset is more of the world-weary detective. I'm too old for this shit, although he doesn't actually say that, thankfully. So, but yes, he's kind of the end of his tether. He's seen things deteriorate to such an extent that he's not wanting to continue. And the way that Morgan Freeman actually brings us to screen is quite closed and closeted. He's very sort of buttoned down. He tries not to show a whole lot of emotion or anything. He tries to keep himself professional all times. He's always wearing suit and tie. He's always maintaining a sort of level of integrity about him, and you can tell that he was and is a very good detective. He's very good at his job, but he annoys a lot of people because of the way that he actually tackles these jobs as well, because he's fastidious. He really knows what he's doing. You've got Mills, on the other hand, who is this young detective. He wants to prove himself. He's got more energy than he knows what to do with. In a way, this performance by Brad Pitt is sort of a distant relation to his performance in 12 Monkeys, because he's got some of the twitches and movement and the sort of the overly energetic, not quite to the same extent, obviously, because there's a certain level of sort of mental health issues in the 12 Monkeys film, but it's not that far removed from it. It's like if that character actually integrated himself properly into society a wee bit more and actually settled down and had a family and everything. So yeah, there's a whole sort of dynamic with his character that is the opposite of what Somerset is, and it's one of the reasons you feel that why Somerset is leaving, because this is the next generation of policemen that's coming through, and he wants to take shortcuts. He doesn't want to do the hard work involved in it. And he's very sort of brash, and he's very, very cocky. He says, yeah, I can do this job. I can do it. I'm not coming to this just from traffic duty. I've been in homicide for 5 years. This is the step up I want and all that. So yeah, it's two very different characters, which we have seen a lot of times. You see that in a lot of films. Lethal Weapon springs to mind, for instance. Yeah. So it's that kind of dynamic you've got there. But there are subtle differences here in the way they do it. And I think a lot of that is down to the way that the performances are actually brought to screen with the actors. They've obviously worked very closely together in order to get something that feels grounded and believable, whereas in the likes of Lethal Weapon, you don't really believe it to a certain extent because it's a certain amount of caricature. It's a wee bit over the top, but you don't get that here because it doesn't fit in with the story and it doesn't fit in with the atmosphere of the film. You can't have these, very sort of in-your-face performances in this type of film. It just would not work in the same way.
Yeah, I think that they play off each other really well. Like, there's a very natural chemistry there as well. And as you say, we've got the classic pairing of the sort of cocky rookie and the cop needing retirement. Of course, he's 7 days from retirement. I think one of the most telling sort of montage sequences within this film is when Morgan Freeman's character starts to take out all of these sort of weighty tomes out of the library, and you've got the Bach music playing in the background, and he's reading through like the Divine Comedy and things like that. And then the next day you see Brad Pitt's character get given the Cliff Notes versions. And it's just another shortcut that obviously he wants to take. So I thought that was really telling. And it's moments like that you really appreciate the sort of depth of characterization they've got in there as well. And I also think that they do genuinely drive the the sense of like there's a clear sense of justice that both of them are pursuing. They're just doing it in slightly different ways. They obviously want the same outcome, which is for these killings to stop and for the killer to be put away, but they just have a very different approach to how things should be done. And I think that really works. Like it's not, yes, we've seen it before, and it's a bit like what we were talking about in the F1 movie, but it definitely does not become cliche here. Like Fincher just does not allow that to happen. And of course, facing off the two of them, we have John Doe, played by Kevin Spacey. Now, obviously, quite famously, Spacey stayed off all of the marketing of this, didn't do any of the press junkets and tours beforehand because he wanted to keep the antagonist sort of chilling and unknown. Still on rewatch value, how do you feel about John Doe? Because we don't meet him until about an hour and 10 minutes into the film. Do you still feel that sense of fear watching this, knowing what he's capable of?
Yeah, of course. Even when you have seen the film a couple of times, you still get wrapped up in the story to such an extent that there's this shadow hanging over it, and that shadow is Jonathan Doe. What a name, Jonathan Doe.
I know.
In his library card, this is brilliant. So yes, it still has an impact because of the strength of the film more than anything else. Yes, you know exactly what's going to happen and everything, but I still feel that by holding that character back for such a long time, but having wee bits about him here and there that you don't, again, with same as The Usual Suspects, it's not force-fed to you in any way. That there's an awful lot going on, so you don't realise, you kind of get, the first time you watch it, you understand what's going on at the same time as the detectives, because it's a real surprise. There's so many bits and pieces with like the murders and the way they're actually carried out as well. So you're not able to focus on everything that's going on, and Fincher and obviously the writer work on that by slotting in little things to keep you interested. So yes, the fact that he doesn't appear until an hour in, it's like the shark not appearing in Jaws.
Yeah,
you know, there's that looming aspect of it. You know it's there, but you don't know how it's going to appear, what's going to actually happen. You know, so it's very effective.
Yeah, and I think almost maybe a bit like Verbal, we don't actually know anything concrete about him, and actually the more you would know about either Verbal or John Doe, the less of a threat they would become. So in order to sort of keep that fear or that shadow hanging over the film, you definitely need someone who's not visible constantly and someone who feels one step ahead, because obviously we do get the impression that these are very seasoned detectives who, as Brad Pitt actually says, he knows what he's doing, and yet they're constantly on the back foot of this character. And there is a lot to be said about an unseen threat hanging over the film. Is this one killer? Is this more than one killer? How come he's able to, stay 2 or 3 steps ahead constantly? How is he picking out his victims? And that's the things that the police are puzzling over as well. So I think it is the right decision to sort of keep him out of this film for as much time as humanly possible, because when he does come on screen, he is incredibly impactful. This is one of, I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm probably going to get cancelled. This is one of my favourite Spacey performances because he is absolutely terrifying to me. Like, he's so calm, he's so smug, he's so in control, and he knows that he has the upper hand. And I honestly think this might be one of the scariest on-screen, villains feels like putting it lightly, but I feel this is one of the scariest performances because of how calm he is. It's calm to the point of monotony when he's talking, but you know that there's a danger there. So yeah, I think this is a phenomenal performance. And sort of backing it all up, we've got Gwyneth Paltrow as Tracy, Brad Pitt's wife. Do you feel like she's given a lot? I know that obviously she becomes a focal point for all the wrong reasons later on in the film, but do you feel like she's given a lot to do throughout the film?
Not really, no. She is there partly to push the narrative. She brings Somerset and Mills together in a social situation, so that's part of her role there. And obviously she is one of the reasons why Mills does what he does, because they've been together since they were in high school and all this sort of stuff. So yes, it is a minor role. It definitely is. But I don't see how they could have expanded it in any great way without really giving too much away, because there are elements of her character that feed into the very end of the film. Now, you kind of need that, but you don't need that then explained again or elaborated on, because then that's a signpost that this is going to be something more than, you know, what she's actually there for. So, yeah, it wasn't a role that really needed to be expanded at all, but she was very good on it. Obviously, there's no bad performances in this film either.
No,
so,
I think
but what did you think? Do you think she was underused or anything?
No, I just think, I mean, it's a fairly serviceable part. It's all leading towards a certain point in the film. There's really not much more you can do. She's obviously there, I feel like, in a way to sort of establish this kind of like cozy home life that Mills has, and she's like the sort of like sweetheart that's running all, you know, she's perfectly coiffured, she's making dinner for them both, but at the same time she's also having her own sort of crisis, I guess, because she's pregnant. She's not sure if she wants to bring a child into the world. Like, she's obviously going through her own sort of stuff. So I do think that she's interesting enough, but I mean, ultimately she is kind of there to drive one particular element of the film. What I do love about this film is how grimy it feels. Like, the opening credits are sort of like uncanny and unsettling. The rain is just non-stop sweeping across the screen, and the whole film sort of feels tinged with a kind of like green light, like a sort of off yellow kind of colouring. Do you think that's obviously there to convey sort of moral decay? Do you think it's just supposed to unsettle you? Like, how do you think sort of Fincher's constructed this world? Because it doesn't actually name the city that it's in, I don't think.
No, it doesn't. You assume that it's probably somewhere like New York because of the architecture of the place, because it's all big sort of sandstone buildings and things like that. But it's never named at all, and for very good reason, because they don't want it to be associated. They want it to be outside of relative norms. And the fact is, it rains pretty much constantly, like you say, until the last act. The last act, the sun comes out, and that's probably the most horrific part of the film. Whereas, before, the whole environment is just seedy and going to waste. Like, say, with the green, I sort of took that as being sort of like mold and decay everywhere. It kind of fed into that. Everywhere that they go is run down. There are no nice places. Like Mill's apartment, for instance, it's not brilliant. You know, it's pretty horrible.
There's
it's
a
right
subway
on the
going
subway.
through it.
Yeah. Somerset's place is not that much nicer. Like, when they go to where they think John Doe is, there's the like paint's peeling off the walls and the stairway and all this sort of stuff, and it's just dirty and grimy. So it's the whole reason why Somerset wants away, because he can't stand this anymore, and it just gives this whole sort of sense of foreboding that there's always something around the corner, there's always a danger, there's always a crime, a threat, violence or something. So it's always there, and it's just constant. They can't, like, when you, like, Mills is driving in the car and the windscreen wipers are going back and forward and you still can't see anything in the car, and that's kind of like a metaphor for like the whole story. He doesn't know what's actually just ahead of him, in front of him, because he's not in charge of it, and partly the city's at fault for doing that because it's the whole atmosphere of the place. I thought it was very effective, and it was very, very deliberate.
Yeah, and then you've got Morgan Freeman's character giving that gorgeous speech on apathy when it's him and Mills are sitting at the bar, and he's like, nobody wants to hit a child because it's easier than teaching them. Like, he gives this basically this whole reason as to why he wants out is because the way he sort of sees the city heading, and obviously that's compounded by, you know, there's like dirt and bugs, and as you see, everything's just got this sense of just like it's been left to rot. And I do think it is quite a sort of a nihilistic film in terms of, like, I don't feel that there's a glimmer of hope in amongst any of this, even with the ending. Like, do you get any sense that things are going to improve?
There is no hope at all in this film. That scene that you mentioned where they're in the bar and Somerset is saying basically everything's gone to shit and people are apathetic, and Mills says to him, what, you get an answer to this? And he says, no, I'm just as bad. So he's not somebody who thinks he can change anything, or moving away is really going to change anything for him. He's just as bad. So there's no hope at all in this film. It's not that sort of movie. And if you've come in expecting something like that, who told you to watch this film?
Yeah, who made you think this is going to be tied up in a ribbon by the end? Yeah, I do think it is a film that I imagine if you watched it a lot, as in fairly frequently, it could quite easily grind you down because it's so dark. And as you say, there's no promise of any sort of solution at the end of it, not even from the people who are obviously out there sort of seeking justice. But I will say that yes, there's a lot of disturbing imagery in it, but I feel like, again, a bit like The Usual Suspects, a lot of the violence is implied. You're not witnessing these sort of torturous deaths. What did you think of that kind of setup? You get to see the crime scene, but you don't get to see the actual act. What did you think of that?
It was very clever because it's leaving it to your own imagination what actually happened. Like the first scene, the gluttony one, and they go in and it's this obviously very obese man with his face in a plate of spaghetti. And it's only when they actually go through the whole scene, he's got barbed wire on his hands and his feet, so he can't actually move from the chair. There's a bucket underneath, which he was using to vomit. And there was obviously things like the perpetrator went out halfway through in order to get more food and all this sort of stuff. So all this, the way that all plays in, you don't need to actually see somebody being force-fed. If you're seeing the aftermath of it, and your imagination goes well, because your imagination will be far worse than anything that they could put on screen in order to depict that. So you're kind of going, this is fucked up. This is really, really fucked up. And it only continues from there when you get the lawyer. You only see that in the aftermath as well, and he's been bled out for a couple of days, and they're thinking, what the fuck was that? And again, it gets progressively worse. And again, you're only seeing the aftermath. You never see it actually in action because you don't need to. It's all about the fact that this was all meticulously planned, and you are seeing everything at the same time as the detectives. And you can be sure that they're using their imagination to figure out what's going on. Yeah.
I was going to say, do you have a favourite murder? That's the wrong question to ask. Which of the 7 sins or which of the 7 murders do you think has the most impact? That's the polite way of putting it.
Oh, it's the one that wasn't actually a murder. It was the one where the guy had been, where he had been, well, he took his hand off for a start in order to lead the police to him. But it was the fact with that one that he had pictures taken of him as he degraded, and you could see the way that he changed. And just when they pulled back the cover, and it was almost like a mummy because it was so like shrunken and everything. The skin was really tight. There was no like sort of real flesh on it. That was probably the scene I thought, yep. Yeah, this is probably as bad as it's going to get. But I was obviously wrong. But yeah. What about you?
No, that scene in particular, because you know that corpse is going to gasp at some point. I've seen this before, obviously. And every fucking time I absolutely lose my mind because it's so close up and you're just like, Jesus Christ, like this guy's not dead. So that I always find really unsettling. But I also find the aftermath of the Lust murder really upsetting as well, because you have the guy who was basically forced to kill this sex worker with a modified sort of sex toy that's obviously been made into a knife, and he is screaming the place down, basically saying, I had a gun in my throat and he told me to fuck her, so I fucked her, and he was like, and I knew I was killing her. And it's so bad because I think this is the kind of first time that John Doe has used someone else to carry out his murder, and obviously the after effects on the guy who's done it is he's completely traumatized by what he's been made to do. So I always find that really quite terrifying as well, because obviously he's brought somebody else into it, which is sort of unusual compared to the rest of the murders. And do you have is there a scene in particular within the film that makes you think, oh, this is a wee bit scarier than I thought, or like this is like almost too tense, or like sort of too sort of thrilling to get to the end? Is there anything in particular that sort of stands out to you as being like, this is the scene that kind of makes me a wee bit timid about watching the rest of it?
Strangely enough, it wasn't one that actually had any sort of these elements into it. It was actually the chase scene where they're at John Doe's apartment and where John Doe actually turns up, and the fact that just you get a real sense of what John Doe is actually like at that point before you're actually really introduced to him at all. Before you know, it turns out to be Spacey, and he's soft spoken and he's very timid but very clever. The way that he reacts, he's standing there with a bag of groceries and he stops and then he assesses the scene and then just takes a gun out of the bag and starts shooting right away. And it's that whole sort of chase sequence that kind of informed everything that I needed to know about John Doe before actually meeting him, because he was clever, he was resourceful, he didn't care who he was actually hurting or where he was actually going in order to get away. And the fact that he could have killed Mills on the spot where he had him on the ground and he basically smacked him in the head, but he didn't kill him because it's all part of his plan and his game. He didn't need to do that. And I thought that's more chilling than seeing any of these other scenes for me. What about you? Did you have something in mind?
Yeah, I think I do like the investigation of John Doe's apartment, because it is a sort of literal house of horrors. Like there's stuff in, and I mean stuff because you don't know what it is. There's like things in jars and it's all very dark. And then for me, it's not, yes, that is really scary because and he's got what is it? He says there's 280 notebooks and they're all full of, you know, different like ramblings. So there's that. There's obviously an unhinged element. But I think for me, the scariest thing about that is when they go into the bathroom and there's obviously the photographs have been developed in the bath, and Mills turns around and goes, he was the photographer at the crime scene. And you're like, fuck, we've met him before. How did we not notice who that was? How did I pay attention to his face? What did he look like? And there's this sense that you've been duped as well. So I find that really unsettling, because how did you not twig that's who it was? You know, I always think that's quite creepy because he's been at the crime scenes. And you get, you know, in that scene where the photographer is trying to sort of make their way in, you know, they're sort of seen as part of the vermin and the decay of society. Because why would you want to go in and take a photo of a crime scene as well, especially one so horrific? But actually, of course, it turns out it was him all along. So I always find that really creepy. It's like you have actually been introduced to him, you've seen him, and yet you did not know that he was obviously in that stairwell. So I just think it does a fantastic job of really keeping you on edge, essentially, the entire time. And I think that's backed up by Howard Shore's score. Try to say that 3 times quickly. Again, a bit like what we've had in the Usual Suspects. There's a real pace to it when it needs to be, but also it feels very full and very sort of orchestral. How do you think that sort of drives this feeling of like oppression throughout the film? Oh yeah,
just the atmosphere is already there. You could watch this without any soundtrack, but having this Howard Shore score in there just makes it really sort of tense and tight all the way through it, and it works fantastically. But it's always in the background. It's never actually announcing itself. It's just there to enhance the scenes, which a good soundtrack should really do. But yeah, there's that, and obviously there's a few sort of needle drops as well that are in there, like Haircut 100. Did you? Yeah. Which is just. Because I remember, I think I've got the Se7en soundtrack somewhere, and like midway through that is Haircut 100s, Love Plus One.
But then there's like Bach, and then obviously Somerset listens to jazz as well, which feels wildly out of place, because it's like it's not it's like kind of soft sensual jazz that he listens to. It's not like it's anything sort of bombastic. So you're just thinking, how do you come home from watching somebody who's had to peel his own skin off and listen to something that's sort of like getting you in the mood? You know, it's very odd compared to the job that they do.
Yeah, I think that's more of his process of trying to sort of cleanse himself for the day. It's like he listens to that music when he sleeps. When he tries to sleep, he uses a metronome. Because that helps block out the noise. And the thing is, we obviously talked about the soundtrack. As well as the soundtrack, there's a whole soundscape From the first moment in that film until they are actually driving out to the desert, it's wall-to-wall noise. There's noise all the time because it's a city. It's one of these, you could regard it as a 24-hour city. There's always stuff going on and there's always some sort of noise. And obviously that is something that Somerset tries to block out using the metronome, which he eventually fails to do because the case and everything is starting to really get to him, and he tosses the metronome and obviously smashes it up because of that. And he resorts to using a flick knife and a dartboard. So which I think quite interesting.
Yeah, I find that a really good character point as well. It's like he's obviously been broken by what he's seen, but you're so right about the sound design and soundscape, because I think from the minute you find the first corpse, who isn't related to the Seven Deadly Sins, but is actually played by the writer who's written the script. He's the dead body. You get that sort of scuttle across the floor because there's lots of bugs, and from the minute that starts, I mean, I hate the sound of anything crawling. So from the minute that starts, you're like, oh, this place is dirty, or it's, you know, that whole decay thing comes back into it, and there's always like police car noises, people shouting at each other in the street. Like, it's just, the only time you would expect to get peace is in the library, but of course they start playing the music instead, and obviously it is quite soothing music, but at the same time it's still not silent. There's never any complete silence, as you say, until we get to the end. So one of the things that really stands out for me as well in this film is the cinematography and the sense of claustrophobia that I think is present throughout the entire film. There's a lot of, I think, quite interesting stylistic choices and sort of visuals that really sort of make the film, or sort of like boost the film's kind of themes and this whole sense of like that, you know, society's going down the plug. What did you think of because it feels very Fincher-esque. I hate using that word, but it feels like it feels like a David Fincher film. Like, did you get that when you were watching it first time around? Does it still have the same impact now when you're watching it? Yeah,
it follows through to the subsequent watches from the first one. It makes a very good use of darkness and shadows, and because shadows and everything are always foreboding for something that's going to be happening. It sets itself out right from the very first scene, the very first murder, because it's shot in the same way for all the subsequent ones. It's dirty, it's grimy, there is stuff everywhere, and it's all grey and black and brown. And the first one, Somerset goes into the scene and the policeman there says, it was a crime of passion. And he says, just look at all the passion on the wall there.
I have that written down. What a line. Yeah. What a line.
What a way to start it. So it's just, it sets itself out in such a way that this is going to be a dark film, and it's working its way with the atmosphere of the film and the way that it's actually presented. So I think the cinematography is very, very important here, because you can't have this being bright and sunny. You can't have you can't have contrast at all. No. It has to be getting worse and worse and worse as we're going through the Seven Deadly Sins. There can't be any let up with this type of film at all, and the way that it's shot kind of shows that. It gets more gory, I think, as it goes along.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I definitely think that it becomes more graphic. And also because the first sin that we see everything through their torchlight. So the room obviously itself is complete darkness, but by the time we get to Pride, the model's room is very like bright and white. But then you've got the contrast of the bloodied head against the crisp white sheet. Yeah. So even though it is a room that's bright and airy, there's still obviously a clear sort of marker of violence that has gone on there as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely some really gorgeous visuals to look at as well, but in a sense that it keeps you unsettled basically from start to finish. Without going into, obviously, we've avoided spoilers for The Usual Suspects, so I think we've done quite well. But what do you think of the film's final act?
I thought it was really, really powerful. I wasn't expecting it to happen in the way it happened, because Mills has dogs that he loves, and I thought they were going to come into it in some way, but they kind of cut that off at the knees, because when they come out of the car and Somerset says there's nothing here, and then he looks around and says, oh, there's a dead dog, and Doe says, I didn't do that. That wasn't me. So
which is actually quite funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of like at that moment going, okay, right. So where have we been? What have we seen so far? And there's obviously the stairwell scene is really informative because Mills actually says who he is at the time. He says, Detective Mills, gives him his name, basically to try and ward them off. So, and it's that one throwaway remark informs everything that happens in the final scene. I like the way that it was done, in that you separate Mills and Somerset quite early on, because he has to go and see there's this van coming towards them. So there's a distance between them. And because of where they are, it's like electrical pylons and stuff. They can't communicate. There's no way they can communicate with the radios because it's too much static. So it felt very natural the way that it actually unfolded. And obviously everything was to do with John Doe being in charge. And Somerset says that. He opens up the box and then says, John Doe's in charge. Yeah. Everybody back away. He's in charge. And you never see anything. Nope. You don't see the box. You just see the reactions, and you just see, obviously, it unfolds from there. I felt it was immense. It was such a good scene. Again, twisty, yes, absolutely, but it works so well. And I wasn't expecting. I didn't expect the ending. I don't know. Did you work it out?
Oh, absolutely no. Like that, for me, this all shit starts hitting the fan, although it has already. The minute they get in that police car and John Doe obviously is kind of smug, but still that sort of emotionless way of talking, and he totally sets up Mills. He pushes Mills' buttons, and he knows how to get him to lose his temper. And he makes the flippant remark of, I won't want to miss your big grand finale, like whatever you've got planned. And you get that slight smirk across John Doe's face, and you're like, well, this isn't going to end well. Like, there's no way this is, there's just something that's not right here, and you can't ever quite put your finger on it. It's so unbelievably tense. And then from the moment they get out of the car, and it flips between these sort of like, first of all, they're completely out of the city. So there's not that sort of grey sense of decay. But then you're flipping between the sort of helicopter shots, the mid shots, and the close-ups. And Brad Pitt is like acting his arse off. Like, he is so good in these last scenes, because I can only imagine, I mean, this is, let's face it, this is like peak Spacey. This is, Spacey's career is flying at this point, and he's given it, I'm trying to tell you how much I admire you, in that completely fucking unnerving, calm voice. And he's absolutely losing his shit, and he's crying and he's shouting, and he's going through, I mean, never talk about 7 deadly sins. He's going through the 7 stages of grief, trying to make up his mind as to how this film was going to conclude, essentially. And he is brilliant in it, like in a way that I think you don't often maybe necessarily associate with Brad Pitt, because he's usually playing the sort of cheeky charmer roles, I guess. And yet he is, he's delivering a masterclass here. And I still think that to this day, no matter how many times you've seen this film, the ending absolutely holds up and still has impact. And I think that, I don't know, would you say that obviously The Usual Suspects has had impact on sort of other films? Would you say that Se7en has had the same kind of impact? I don't feel like this type of film is really made anymore. I don't feel.
No, this is an 18 certificate film, so it excludes the vast majority of the film going audience. So it has to be something special in order for these films to be successful. They tend not to make a lot of money. Well, having said that, obviously Tarantino is specialised in 18 certificate films and got an audience. So it comes down to a number of factors. It has to be well made. It has to be relatively cheap as well. And it has to have the kind of performances that you get from Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt, especially Brad Pitt in Grief, like you say, is just immense. So I don't think it's had the impact that we kind of thought it would have. But obviously, there have been. It gives more license towards horror films more than anything else, I think, to have this sort of gory nature as well, because a lot of horror films around about that time were kind of like Friday the 13th and all this sort of stuff, Nightmare on Elm Street, which is more sort of stylized. It is, there are gory kills and all that, but nothing in this sort of way. But I don't think it's had the impact. It's obviously been a very good calling card for David Fincher. He's obviously, I know he had a career before then, but it obviously enhanced his career because it was such a success. It's a difficult thing to replicate, I think.
Yeah, in brackets, Netflix, we would really love more Mindhunter in this house, please and thank you.
Yes.
Because I do think that if a film like this were to be made now, the off-screen violence would probably become more on-screen, and it probably would go down the horror route more than the sort of detective thriller. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. And it would probably be more sort of a Walter Presents type of Scandi. They've kind of taken that over with some of the dramas that they do, keeping things off screen but making it unsettling enough that you would watch it. But that's obviously television rather than film. But yeah, it's like I say, it's a difficult one to replicate. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, and would you say up there with Fincher's best? Would you
Oh,
place
absolutely, yes, definitely. He's a prolific director, but this is the sort of top tier Fincher. It definitely is, and it's difficult to find any like a film that you're picking small holes in is a film that you really love, basically, because you're not concerned with the big themes and the main actors or anything. It's the small things that may raise discussion. So, and this seems to be one of these films that like that. So yeah, I would say it's pretty much top tier as far as he is concerned. But he's not had that many duff ones either. So
no, although to say, I think because I'd watched Zodiac sort of back to back with this yesterday, I would feel that although Zodiac's got kind of similar subject matter, obviously the serial killer, it definitely didn't have that. Se7en makes me feel physically unnerved from start to finish. I didn't really feel that with Zodiac. There was pockets of it where you were just like, get out of that basement, but it didn't have that the whole way through. There was like a jokey newspaper room banter and stuff like that, whereas this just makes me feel physically sick because you're just like, I know what's coming and it's really, really bad. So yeah, I think this is definitely one of Fincher's most sort of brutal kind of pieces of work as well. And I love it. I do need to get obviously a better copy than my dodgy Barras DVD that I didn't realise I had. But yeah, I could go back and watch this time and time again, which is a weird thing to say about a film that's so bleak.
There's a nice I've got a wee DVD set which has got the main film on one, and I think it's 3 different commentaries, and on the second disc it's got like tons of supplemental material, which I remember I was on holiday. It was 1996 and I was on holiday. It was actually I'd gone to visit my sister in Australia and I was in Hong Kong, and I saw Se7en on Laserdisc at the time, because this was, and obviously the film was on like the first couple of discs, then there was a couple of discs of supplemental material, and it was all like the notebooks. It was John Doe's notebooks and crime scene photos. This is on the DVD as well, but I was so wanting to buy this, and I was thinking, I would love to have this, but it was really expensive to buy it, obviously, and I didn't have a video disc player, so it was kind of, you're investing several £100s into something that's pretty much, it was just about to be superseded by DVDs anyway. But I would recommend getting. I think there's a Blu-ray. There's a Blu-ray copy, I think, and it's got all this stuff on it as well, and it's really kind of detailed, everything to do with all the crime scene photos are fairly horrific in it as well. So that kind of there's about 3 hours worth of content on the supplementary materials. So yeah, it's well worth seeking out.
And Fincher is so like famously thorough, so you can imagine that. I also imagine like as an actor going on to a set like that must be quite terrifying, because it's not like, we're going to have this, follow this tennis ball and that will jump out at you. But like it was all there. Like I imagine that really helped them get into character and really sort of embody themselves in the world, I guess.
Oh yeah, and he's obviously known for doing multiple takes and redoing things like 60, 70 times if necessary, and it might not be the 70th one that he takes. He may have taken the 23rd take because that's actually the best one, but it gives the actors the opportunity to try different things, but then it goes beyond them trying different things. It's really getting like sort of almost like a more authentic performance from him. So he is very difficult to work for, but people are lining up to work for him.
Oh,
so,
God, and you would. Yeah, you absolutely would. Like I said, more Mindhunter, please, because I genuinely think that's the best thing to ever happen to the Netflix.
Yeah, it is really good, yeah. He keeps teasing it, saying that he will go back and do it, but after the next couple of things he's going to be doing...
I know. And the thing is, the next couple of things he's going to do are going to be brilliant, so I've got no objections to him going and doing more work. I just really want this.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Cool. So do you have anything else you'd like to add about our beloved twosome for this episode?
No, not necessarily. I regard them as being two of the best films from the decade, not just the year. And the whole point of doing this marathon for me was so I could actually talk about these two films. And so it's kind of wrapped up the whole 12 months and quite nicely into these two films because they were very, very important films for me. They kind of informed the type of film that I really wanted to watch more and more. So yeah, I haven't got a bad word to say about either of them. Really enjoyed both of them. What about yourself?
No, I feel the same. These are two films that are endlessly watchable for me. Like there's never going to be a point where I go back and watch either of these films and be disappointed in how they've turned out, or, you know, even though I know what twists are coming, like they are so impactful. And yeah, as you've said, inform the types of films that I would then go and seek out to watch, because I know what I like and I know how I like to be made to feel as well, which I think is something to be quite cognizant of if you're watching a film. If it's making you feel uncomfortable, but in a way that you can tolerate, obviously it's doing its job essentially, and I think these films do that.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a shame, obviously, with the people involved in The Usual Suspects, in that you don't really see it in cinemas, like getting brought back, because obviously this would be a perfect opportunity this year for 30 years, because I think Se7en was back out in the cinema for a limited run, but I think so. It might have been this year, it might have been previously, but I think it was there. But you're unlikely to see The Usual Suspects on a big screen again, which is a real shame, because, you know, it's one that kind of deserves it as a cinematic experience for the sound and everything to do with that. But yeah, it was a bit of a shame. Yeah,
if people could stop being paedophiles and rapists, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be a good start, wouldn't it?
It really would. So that is it for this week's episode of the Moviescramble podcast, where we continued our 1995 retrospective. If you have any thoughts on the films we've discussed, of course, you can get us on all of the usual social channels, including Blue Sky, or you can email podcasts@moviescramble.co.uk to give John a little treat in his inbox. Dick pics are not welcomed, just to be clear. But until next time, it is goodbye from me.
Bye.